All right, so I think the recording is getting started. Hopefully that'll pop up here in a second for you all. And so as the slide suggests, this is our 23rd meeting. We've been at this for quite a while now. And so hopefully as we get through tonight's presentation, just particularly at the end when we give a scheduled update, you all will see sort of what's left in front of us. And I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the next few months and everyone's availability, but we'll get to that here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and advance to go over our agenda. So I think most of us know each other, but we do have a few guests this evening that wanted to come and provide some information directly to this group. So first of our guests will be an update. I believe Lucy Lee is here, and we'll spend a few minutes talking about the Denver Moves Everyone transportation plan that the city has recently kicked off. Then we will hear from colleagues from DDPHE and DITO to talk a little bit about some funding opportunities that the city is pursuing that is in direct connection with the West area. Later on, in about 20 or so minutes, 30 minutes or so, we will be hearing or getting an update from Gabby Serrato, really furthering our conversation that we started last month related to the cloverleaf and some of the opportunities there, and just to really let her engage with you all directly and get a little bit of input and feedback for her in that particular project, which of course is directly connected to the West area. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, I'd like to give an update. I think hopefully you all will see the update as good news. We're adding a little bit more time to the schedule to really make sure that we have time to work with you all on engagement and outreach throughout the West, particularly as we now are about to enter into fall, and with fall comes the holiday season. And so really wanted to have an opportunity to adjust our schedule, taking into account the holiday time frame when many of us get busy, and also in reaction to the unfortunate situation with COVID, that it's not yet fully behind us. And so being sensitive to that situation that continues, we've worked internally to add some additional time to our schedule. And then I'll close with a couple of upcoming next steps, and then we'll conclude. So Lucy, if you are ready, I would love to turn things over to you to introduce yourself, maybe give a little bit of background on this project, and then to really just engage with the community however would be beneficial for you. So I can't see you at the moment, so I'm going to try to pull you up, and I'm going to put myself on mute and just really turn things over to you. So feel free to take it away, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucy Lee, and I'm with Dottie's Denver Moves Everyone 2050 team. What Denver Moves Everyone is Dottie's citywide transportation plan. And what this is it will help prioritize transportation improvements throughout the city at the end of the plan. And right now we're in the grassroots outreach phase and trying to hear back from as many Denverites as possible about how they move through Denver, walking, biking, single occupancy vehicles, public transit. And right now we're in the goals validation phase of our outreach. And by visiting denvermoveseveryone.com, you can fill out you can use our engagement tool to provide feedback on how you get through the city and whether you agree or disagree with how we've defined our draft goals for the plan. That's all of the update I have right now. We're going to be we have been at several events throughout the city, and we will continue to be at events throughout the city to hear back from as many people as possible. So I'll put that link in the chat right now, and I'm happy to take any questions. And thank you again, Eugene, for having me on this call.
So happy to take a few moments for questions from the steering committee. One of the questions that I wanted to ask Lucy is, what's the general time frame for this plan, if you all have identified a time frame?
Oh, sorry, I think I unmuted. So right now we're in the finding the path forward phase. So we're continuing outreach, and next fall is when we should have a draft plan ready. So really right now we're just gathering feedback from the community at various pop-up events, going to community events, but also rec centers, libraries, different pop-up events throughout the city. And we're going to take the feedback we get from the community and put that in our plan for what improvements we should prioritize for transportation.
One more question for me, and then I'll stop and make sure that we make space for our steering committee members. Is the intent of this plan to not only just really truly talk about transportation and the needs of the community moving forward over, I presume, the next 20 years or so? So that's a question, the time frame for the plan. And then secondly, is this to help direct investments for actual projects? Or is it more of a visionary document where we really want to understand how Denverites imagine transportation as we move into the future?
Yes, those are great questions. So I think the last city transportation plan Denver had was in 2004. So this one is really meant to be comprehensive through 2050 and looking ahead 20 some odd years. And I'll have to double check with the team. I think it's just more of a visionary document. I don't know what specific transportation improvements will be outlined per se, but just, if there's poor lighting in some neighborhoods or areas, if pavement needs to be redone, if more stops need to be added, just hearing from the community about what transportation improvements by any means of how people get around need to be prioritized.
Great, thank you for that. So are there any questions from the group? And Elizabeth, I see you, and I now see your hand, so feel free.
Question, I really apologize because I missed the earlier part, but I'm going to jump off of Eugene's question and that response. I'm curious, Denver Streets Partnership is working on the sidewalk campaign right now, and Sidewalk Palooza coming up. Sidewalks are critical for complete streets, and it's mind-bogglingly inefficient and problematic and inequitable to have sidewalks be maintained by individual households or businesses. It's a vital public infrastructure. I'm curious if policy recommendation changes like that are part of this visionary document, or what the scope is.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's a wonderful question, and I've taken that down to bring back to my team. Again, I think what we're doing is just gathering feedback from everyone, as many people as we hear from, to kind of look at, okay, what are the largest problems or the problems we keep seeing reoccurring from the community, and how can we pave a path forward to addressing that? So absolutely, I hear that, and I took that down, and I'll bring that back to the team.
Thanks.
Zach, I see that you've joined us this evening. Is there anything from the Dottie perspective that you would want to add to that, either to the Denver Moves Everyone process or to Elizabeth's question specifically? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just thought I would ask.
Hi, Eugene. Yeah, sorry, I'm in transit at the moment, so it might be a little loud. But I think it's a really comprehensive look, right, as Lucy said. And so I think, we're really trying to look at, every aspect of transportation. And so I think, things like what Elizabeth just stated, are probably on the table to be examined and understood a little bit better. And so, yeah, I mean, this is really setting the stage for the next 50 years. So I think we really want to look very deeply at, or not the next 50 years, excuse me, I'm still in the year 2000 apparently, but really setting the stage for the next 30 years or so to really look comprehensively at how, transportation in our city will evolve. And that includes everything from, maintenance to construction, to systems of transportation and the like. So hopefully that was helpful. Sorry, I'm just trying to to move about, and hopefully that was an okay answer. And I'm sure Lucy will follow up as well.
All right, I think I see one more hand. Is that Naomi's hand that popped up? And then I'll come back to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much. I haven't had the opportunity to talk about the Denver, the Moves Everyone plan. So I was wondering if we could help explain a little bit how, even just with the name, how the existing plans such as Denver Moves, transit, pedestrians and trails, et cetera, fits into this. Is it part of a series? Does this trump other ones? And also what kind of feedback is being collected here? How does it differ from feedback that's been collected previously and build upon it? And what are the gaps that this project particularly is trying to fill that hasn't been accomplished so far?
Yes, thank you, Naomi. Excellent questions. So this plan doesn't necessarily trump other plans. Denver Moves Everyone will aim to build a more united city in alignment with the Blueprint Denver and Game Plan for a Healthy City plans. All the other plans that you mentioned as well. This will kind of feed into those. Our engagement tool, we're in the process of analyzing all of the comments we've collected. We're in the second, it's phase 1.1 of collecting data from this link on the engagement tool. The first phase, 1.0, almost 8 weeks ago, we were asking people what their values were for this plan. And now we're looking at, okay, here are the draft goals we've defined based on those values, and where do you fall on the spectrum of agreeing or disagreeing with those? And then the next phase of the outreach will be identifying options for future transportation improvements. And we're looking to launch that phase, I believe, mid-October at the same link, denvermoveseveryone.com, and we'll be releasing major findings from those. I'll have to check with the team when exactly, but it's a ton of feedback we're getting, so we're just in the process of filtering through all of that right now. Was there another question? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I don't mean to put you on the spot in this. But I'd like to, it's just kind of looking at the website, Denver Moves Everyone, and looking at these values and just, I took the survey that was sent out. Have these values and this feedback not been gathered in other processes such as Blueprint Denver or other planning processes? It does seem to me that sometimes a lot of these questions are similar that come up, for instance, in our West Area Plan that the steering committee has been working on. And so just kind of wondering specifically what these kind of vision questions and what this community engagement is trying to gather that hasn't been gathered before. That's specifically what I was asking.
No, that's a great question too. With the team, I'll bring that question back to the team because really we're just trying to reach right now as many Denverites as possible. So that could be why there's some overlap with some of the questions that have been asked. And really, with the grassroots outreach efforts that I'm leading, we're specifically targeting gaps in the engagement tool from areas in the city or neighborhoods that historically are underrepresented, that we don't always hear from in these questions that are asked in different surveys throughout the city and different plans. So that's why there could be some overlap there as well. But definitely great feedback. I'll bring that concern back to the team as well.
Great, thank you so much. I will stop asking questions now.
Well, I want to just give Elizabeth a quick follow-up. I think we have time for about 30 seconds more on this before we need to move to our next guest. Did you have a follow-up, or was your question?
In the interest of time, let things go. I think just one comment, it would be helpful. I just was looking at the website, and it's lovely that there's a thing on values, but it's unclear what is assumed to be included in there. And in the context of safety and security and equity, the approaches to that are going to be really important to balance out the social and racial justice bit and what affects people's sense of safety and security. Some people may feel safer with a lot of police presence. Other people may feel threatened by that. And I'm just kind of curious how those different things are being framed, particularly because those questions around when doing work in mobility in the Valverde neighborhood, a lot of the concerns that people had about transportation access had more to do with the sense of safety, but they were very, very diverse perceptions around safety. And we can't have public safe realms if people don't feel safe being out in them. Yeah. Definitions would be cool to understand how those things are being framed.
Absolutely. I love that, Elizabeth. I took all of that down and I'll bring that to the team. That's a very valid concern to have, and that's great feedback. Thank you.
Well.
All right, and for anyone who's joining us, thank you for joining us this evening. We've just heard a quick update on the Denver Moves Everyone plan that's just getting underway. It's been underway for a few weeks now. I'm going to ask you all to take this information on the screen down for any follow-up that you would like to provide to that process. And of course, because you all have been with us for 2 years now, the input and the feedback that we've collected through this process is being shared with Dottie. So do know that that information is being made available through the work that you all have done in this space. So I would like to go ahead. I'm going to, and just again, reach out, use the contact information on the screen, or of course, please feel free to, as you've always done, put questions and things in the chat because this is being recorded and we'll be able to capture information that way. I want to go ahead and move us on to our next guests that are here to talk about an opportunity that the city is exploring, I think, in partnership with some adjacent jurisdictions on some EPA funding that could be used to help, and particularly within the West area. So I will stop talking there and turn things over to our guests, David and John.
Thanks, Eugene. Hey, everyone. I'm John Hill. I'm with the Denver Office of Economic Development and Opportunity. And with me is Dave Wilmuth, who is with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. And we wanted to just present today on the EPA Brownfields program as we are going to apply for a grant this year to address some brownfields sites that would fall within this West Area plan. As Eugene mentioned, we are partnering with the City of Sheridan as well as the Urban Land Conservancy. And so I'm going to ask Dave to come in since he's the expert and just talk us through the specifics of it, and then we will take any questions. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, John. So I think as John mentioned, so John and I co-manage the Denver Brownfields program. The Denver Brownfields program has received 3 prior assessment grants like this. Our approach is generally to look at corridors, to cast a wide net, and then within that net to work on specific projects. So some of our past corridors have been South Platte River and Colfax. Just so that we're all on the same playing field with definition, I want to throw this out and go over it and provide some examples. So this comes out from EPA. It's actually in statute. A brownfield is real property, the redevelopment or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of pollutant or contaminant. And these can be real or perceived. So some examples of what a brownfield site is based on legacy land uses are former gas stations, former dry cleaners, historical landfills, former industrial or commercial properties, older buildings with asbestos containing building materials within them. Generally, brownfield sites are not Superfund sites. They are low-risk sites that will fall into a regulated cleanup program like Superfund or hazardous waste cleanup. And generally, these sites or the cleanup is actually done through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's voluntary cleanup program. And here we go. So the grant proposal that we're proposing for the Federal Boulevard corridor, which we're calling the Boulevard Brownfields Initiative, the proposal would seek funding to conduct environmental studies of potential redevelopment projects, including affordable housing projects, public amenities, and other types of projects within this corridor. We would seek the maximum amount the guidelines allow, which is $500,000. This would be sufficient to study approximately 10 revitalization sites. As John mentioned, for this grant, we would be partnering with City of Sheridan and Urban Land Conservancy. And so the corridor would extend not just in Denver, but also south through the City of Sheridan. These grants run for about a 3-year period. So within this 3-year period, we need to identify the 10 revitalization sites and conduct whatever studies that we need to do for those. Grant time frame, couple things. One, these EPA brownfields grants are very competitive. Based on prior year RFP rounds, only about 1 in 3 proposals is actually awarded that grant. EPA is expecting to award about 87 grants nationally, totaling about $32 million. The actual RFP has not come out. We're expecting it any day now. Generally, like I said, these are annual RFPs. Usually they come out in the fall, and usually they give you about 2 months to turn around a proposal and submit it. So we are expecting to submit a proposal in November. EPA does take its time evaluating those proposals, largely due to the large number of proposals that they receive. And we would expect that award announcements would be made sometime in the spring. What we're here tonight to do is to seek your input on how this proposal might be framed, how the post-award community engagement is conducted. So if we were to get the award, what are your thoughts and suggestions on community engagement and participation in this process? And then lastly is, and this could be potentially helpful for the proposal, is if you have some suggestions on potential sites that we might list in the proposal, that would certainly strengthen our proposal as we develop it and submit it in November. So with that, I think we go to the next slide. I think we're going to have a little bit of time to answer maybe 1 or 2 questions. And if you have any more questions or we run out of time, please email your questions and comments to John Hill at this email address. So with that, let's turn it over to questions and comments.
All right, well, John and David, thank you so much for presenting about this opportunity. I see a hand from Yvonne, and of course, as I mentioned a moment ago, feel free to put questions in the chat, take down John's contact information, and if you wanted to share information directly to John and to David, that would be a great way to do that. But Yvonne, what's your question?
I'm just concerned about the water and the fact that we're all moving to electric cars. My husband's in the petroleum industry, and they're already talking about fossil fuels and how they're going to combat all this migration over to electric cars. And so I'm hoping that this is part of that. And then I also will send, because the Valverde neighborhood has a very toxic area down by the park. And so I would like that area included in this study if possible.
So this grant program certainly historically has focused on mitigation on former gas stations, petroleum sites, et cetera. So that really is a central theme to this. You know, as these properties are identified as potential brownfields, many of them end up being former gas stations where we go in and we check and see if there has been leaks and see if there's mitigation and cleanup that needs to occur. So that has historically always been one of the main drivers behind where this funding goes. So I think that's it's very timely, considering, as you said, the move toward electric and potentially away from petroleum stations. Regarding the specific neighborhood, and I think this actually will also answer the question about Elizabeth's question about the overlap with the West area. This is going to focus in a relatively narrow area around Federal Boulevard. So we haven't quite determined the exact parameters as of yet in terms of how far out we'll go, but anything that borders Federal Boulevard in the West area plan would potentially be eligible for something like this. So when you talk about Valverde, it really just depends on the part of Valverde that you're speaking about specifically. And there are other resources and funding streams out there. So if this particular program doesn't touch specifically on that, it doesn't actually close the door to potential brownfields mitigation. It just would not happen within the context of this particular grant.
Great, thank you for that clarification or the information, both from Yvonne and from you, John. Any other questions? I can't see the chat, so I'll need some help. And if anyone's put a question in the chat, feel free to take yourself off mute to ask your question. All right, anyone? Well, I have one last question for you all, and that is, and I apologize if this was mentioned, but are there other locations within Denver where this grant or this type of grant has been successfully won and we've done work? Is there a place that these folks could go and see, or that you could point to?
Well, we a few years back we received a grant very much like this that ran the entirety of the Colfax corridor, and I believe there were 26 projects that were done. It was a little bit before my time. I think Dave, if you're still with us, Dave can speak to it a lot more thoroughly than I can.
Yeah, a number of examples, both from Colfax and from South Platte, in this area. So we worked on the CDOT headquarters. We worked on STEAM on the Platte. We also worked collaboratively with the developer for St. Anthony's and Denver Housing Authority on their senior housing project. And those are just a few of the examples kind of brownfields worked on in the past. As I mentioned, we've been fairly successful with these projects. Actually, the projects that we assess actually coming to fruition, being built, and some of that success is actually due to this type of grant being able to assess the environmental hurdle for redevelopment projects and to provide some certainty as to the environmental risk of a redevelopment project.
Thank you for that. That's great to know that there are places that this has already been leveraged and that we have been successful in the past with these kinds of pursuits. So that's really good news. Any other questions from the steering committee members? All right, going once, going twice. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Really look forward to seeing where this goes, and hopefully we will be successful in securing some additional funds that can be leveraged to be employed in this part of the city. So thank you very much for bringing this to us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to see if Gabby has had a chance to join us. I'm not sure if she's here yet. I know she had a meeting that she was going to come to us from. So Gabby, are you out there? And if not, I will skip ahead a little bit.
Can you hear me?
There you are. Great. Thank you for joining us. So I will go ahead and advance the slides here, and just feel free to take it away. You want to introduce yourself and then go from there.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, it was not actually a meeting. I have to go to the gym because I think we are so overworked that I need to release my stress and anger against a punching bag or something, or just sweat it out. So sorry for looking like this. I literally just got back from like hot yoga. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabby Cerrado. I am over in transportation design, basically a counterpart of Zach, who has been part of this process. But I am the project manager of the Colfax Federal Interchange Transformation Study. I believe that you all talked about this at your last stakeholder meeting. And for what I hear, I'm sorry I couldn't join you. I think it was, 2 weeks ago? I'm not 100% sure. Or there was some form of NPI group 4 weeks ago. Holy moly, you see, this is what I'm saying. It's just a blurb now. It's just a big blurb of time. And I hear that you guys had a really robust discussion. And I kind of wanted to bring it back up again because I want to hear it. Obviously, I heard it from Beth, and I heard it from Eugene. And I've already sort of presented to different groups where you have already heard this presentation. But just in case, I'm going to go over it again. So next slide, please, Eugene. Oh, and this is not the updated one, but that's okay. The following one, please. There we go. Thank you. So for those of you, if you have not seen it or you were not part of the previous meeting, basically, we are doing a study sort of as a follow-up to the West Colfax bid. Did a really robust sort of community outreach study about what can be done on the 29 acres that is sort of dubbed the cloverleaf. Even though it's 3, but that public sort of like community-led effort sort of led to this study being taken place. And our goal is to basically evaluate how we can transform this area, and in order to basically try to figure out what do we want. One meets the city of Denver's. It's not just Dottie. It is obviously heavily cited, a little bit heavily cited towards Dottie. And I'll go over it in some of the reasons why in a little bit. But in general, what are the goals and values of the city in order to transform these 29 acres in order to get to know those technical aspects so that future development, we can be a little bit more proactive when it comes to all of these large redevelopment parcels that are coming up, and be able to say upfront from the get-go, these are our values. This is what you need to achieve as a baseline. And this is how you can surpass. This is what we're really looking for over here. So obviously to incorporate any future land uses, to connect the neighborhoods and so forth. So the goal of this portion of the study is to basically hand off to CDOT's HPT enterprise, Denver's goals and values, and then they would analyze sort of that, whatever their next steps may be, whether that is analyzing more data analysis from the 4 sort of potential illustrative scenarios that we have come up with, or try to develop sort of the market analysis that they have to go through. So this has been a little bit of the process that we have gone through for the last probably year and a half. Obviously, the discovery, developing the vision framework, which was developed by the PMT and the stakeholders, then the concept development plan, then evaluating those concepts against the framework. And at the beginning of this entire process, we were supposed to come down to one one scenario, one potential option. Unfortunately, that is not going to be the case. There are a lot of, there's some pretty strong competing opinions out there regarding what should, what could this be transformed into. And from Denver's perspective, like I mentioned, we're just trying to set that foundation up so that whoever ends up redeveloping this, whoever CDOT ends up partnering to redevelop this thing, if they want to go down that route, they understand that this needs to have these what they propose needs to meet these values. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere within the city. Next slide, please. So these are the framework values. Obviously, mobility is a pretty big one. Environmental and stormwater is another one. You will see a little map on the next slide, but not yet. Of one of the main reasons why this actually Cloverleaf got sort of built is because Federal Boulevard has a lot of runoff. So when there's any level of high intensity rain, basically all of that stormwater that comes from Federal Boulevard and Conejos in the Sloan's Lake neighborhood basically needs to travel diagonally to Lakewood Gulch in the southeast corner in the Sun Valley neighborhood. So that's why you see the Mickey Mouse ears all over, because that is supposed to be sort of retain that water. So that is one of from Dottie's perspective, those are one of those crucial components in it. Obviously, for also its land use and economics, neither Denver nor CDOT are sort of in the business of building buildings or developing land. So in order for this area to truly transform, it needs to be partnered with some form of private entity in order to redevelop this land. And then the other elements in open space and public realm. Through the large redevelopment process, Parks and Recreation has that baseline 10%. Any large development plan that is out there, the minimum that they need to have for parks, accessible parks, that's a key caveat, accessible parks, is 10% of developable land. What we're saying, one of the things that it was developed through this framework, it needs to go above that. Obviously, again, don't come to us if you're just going to do 2 acres of land and then that's it for parks and that's it. Under those main categories, we have equity, resiliency, connectivity, and health and safety. With examples and definitions sort of for all of these. For example, when it comes to land use and economics under equity, we're talking about affordable housing. Don't come to us if there is not an affordable housing strategy, however you plan to redevelop this. When it comes to, for example, environmental, stormwater, environmental and stormwater under health and safety, we're talking about mitigating, be sustainable, or resiliency, be sustainable your stormwater practices. One of our goals over on Dottie is not to pipe things anymore. Once you pipe things, it's very hard to be able to, it's not sustainable, basically, right? Because if we have a major flood event, which is happening more often now, those pipes can only hold so much water, and then everything comes up either way. So we're trying to, do away from that. When it comes to mobility, that connectivity factor, which I believe, we're also heavily relying on the NPI effort to get that perspective about the community's needs. And what we hear over and over again is, this Cloverleaf is an infrastructure barrier. So provide connections, local road connections. Don't make us go through Colfax or Federal to be able to reach the new elements that are coming just immediately to the east of this Cloverleaf. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the existing conditions and considerations, like I mentioned, sort of our building blocks, right? Or, what do we analyze? Obviously, we need to disperse traffic. Federal Boulevard carries 30 to 40,000 cars every day, and we don't want those cars to go onto our local street network, right? Because, our Federal does, obviously, is an arterial. It carries a lot of the construction vehicles and so forth. So we don't want those in our local roadways. Like I mentioned before, we do want to connect, we do want to establish that grid network of local roadways so that folks in our existing neighborhoods can connect and vice versa onto already developed land. Topography is a pretty darn huge deal here, and you're going to see that in a little bit. Stormwater, I already talked about it a little bit. Open space as well. Pedestrian Connections, I would probably say this is pedestrian and bicycle connections. Again, this cloverleaf is not comfortable to walk and even less comfortable to bike in. And then sort of the community edges, and like this goes a little bit along with the sort of development parcels. We want to make sure that it flows correctly into what's coming up in Sun Valley and in Stadium District. So, when I talked about the slopes, well, in the infrastructure barrier, obviously a good thing to point out is that both roads, Colfax and Federal, are part of the high injury network. So we really need to address that. From the traffic perspective, it flows really well because there is no conflict. There's very little conflict points because it's, a highway. But when you're talking about, pedestrians and bicyclists, these two are major crash sites. The slope changes. So from north to south, we have a 40-foot to 45-foot drop. From west to east, we have a 70-foot drop from basically where the buildings start to where the viaduct starts. Now, one of the biggest caveats in this whole thing is that existing bridge. That bridge was built in 2005, was built with CDOT's Bridge Enterprise Funds. And basically, the state statute requires that if we're no longer going to be using that bridge for anything other but to carry a state highway, then we need to pay it back. Right now, at this date, is being evaluated at $7.5 million. Now, obviously, this thing is not going to get redeveloped in another 5 years, potentially, or 10. So that is a depreciating value. But it's a consideration that we have to keep in the back of our heads. And in order, if any alternatives that we are out there basically removes the bridge, then we're estimating about $1 million cost to take that baby down. Some of the other biggest considerations, obviously, both Colfax and Federal, we have studies that say we're going to do bus rapid transit on these corridors. And then we also have a lot of local transit buses that RTD uses to go down to the Decatur Federal Station. So under those two caveats, we have the first one from RTD saying the Colfax and Federal BRT need to meet at one particular point. Don't make us go down to the Decatur Federal Station just to go back up again. That, basically adds service time to what's already supposed to be established as a bus rapid transit every 7 minutes or less. But for the local bus networks, basically what they do want is because, obviously we have the demand of downtown is what RTD does want is that east access before the Cloverleaf to be able to come down directly to Decatur Federal Station, where it's a major transit hub. So we have those two major considerations at bay. And then from the land use value, right now, Denver, the blueprint has already established this as an urban center corridor and general urban center. So it's kind of split in half. We obviously kind of have to change, we have to figure out if this is the right designation for these. But obviously, we're going to have these major redevelopments that are already taking place, at least in Sun Valley and potentially in Stadium District. So we want to make sure that they flow correctly into the existing neighborhoods. Next slide. So throughout this, basically, I inherited this project back in March of this year. And even before this, there's been a lot of sort of one-on-one meetings with CDOT, our HPT partners, and then with RTD. And then we've held a whole lot of meetings with our different departments here in Denver. And then we also talked with private developers just to understand all of this stuff. What are their needs, wants, and so forth. So these are sort of those preliminary scenarios. These are not set in stone in any way, shape, or form. These are just, we're going to put this in a document. When CDOT decides to actually do something with this thing, they need to open this document up, understand that these are Denver's values. And from the, developer side of things, how open are we to really transforming the site as a city? So these are, these are just, really good concepts of how open Denver is to transforming the site. So, for example, the first scenario, we have the White Diamond. The White Diamond splits Federal Boulevard into sort of couplets. So, obviously northbound going to the east, on the side, tilted to the left, to the east, southbound on the west. And in this particular scenario, we take down the bridge. So by taking down the bridge, what is it? Basically, we are able to level a lot of this parcels, this entire 29 acres. Obviously, it's not going to be flat like Florida, but it's going to give us that ability to develop probably a little bit easier on this. Because we're leveling this baby up, then that also means that we can establish a stronger grid network inside of it. And because we're leveling this baby up, that also means that we can do some form of flexible park space, stormwater park space down the center, or it could be obviously a little bit to the side, but that can follow that diagonal flow, natural flow of the water into Lakewood Gulch. So, you know, again, these are just illustrative. This doesn't mean that, for example, on the flexible park space, that it needs to have a road on each side. This is just, you know, just to provide an example of how you can establish a grid network here. Now, technically, under this option, you could keep the bridge. Hold on, sorry, go back for a second. Under this option, you could keep the bridge because part of that, you know, you do have some benefits having that bridge there. However, we will not be carrying the Federal Boulevard itself. So there's, you know, there's some detriments, you know, that causes overall goals. But the biggest caveat, well, sorry, another benefit with this one, if you can see, it has that east connection directly onto the Decatur Federal Station. That traffic signal right before the one-way couplet of on the intersection of Federal and Colfax. I think my dog just threw up, but that's okay. But one of the biggest caveats on this one is that we have to really think outside the box, or really look at some really great examples of what other cities have done for that BRT at one. Again, we don't want, you know, northbound and your northbound Federal BRT, you know, to meet in one side and then southbound on the other, because that, you know, then we're forcing people to walk a whole lot. So we do have to, you know, figure out some really good examples of that one. Now the next one, please. Now, northbound on the bridge is one of those options that we put on the table because we're keeping as a gray zone, as a loop, to try to not have to pay the bridge enterprise back, because we're technically keeping one section of Federal Boulevard on the bridge itself. So obviously, by keeping that bridge, it doesn't allow us to fully flatten everything up, but it does allow us to have some level of grid network on the north and on the south of Colfax. This one, you know, some of the issues with this one is obviously because we're not grading, then that also means that we cannot establish that flexible stormwater park space. We have to pipe everything. Water doesn't flow up. So we would have to pipe the majority of this thing, and in order to flow down to Lakewood Gulch. And again, we have to figure out a really good sort of creative strategy onto how the BRT systems could meet. If you take a look at the technically northbound Federal Boulevard never quite matches with Colfax. So how are people that want to take that route, how are they going to go around? That's one of those biggest caveats on this one. And if you take a look on the east side, the traffic signal is not fully, it doesn't allow all the way to go down to the Decatur Federal Station. It, you know, sort of, you know, hits, you know, where the back of what is the CDOT building today, and then they have to go around in order to reach Decatur Federal. So those are one of the biggest caveats on this one. But this is one of those options that, again, you know, if you know, maybe technology improves, maybe there's some other standards that we can use later in the year. But this one doesn't require us to pay back that money. Next one, please. All right, so Parkway on the bridge, Parkway over the bridge. This one is the closest one to what the West Colfax bid efforts did, you know, selected back in 2018. Federal Boulevard completely to the west, and then allows basically for that bridge to be utilized as a local roadway. Sort of some of the similar issues or concerns with the other one, where obviously by not flattening everything out, it's a little bit harder to establish that internal grid network. Now, technically on the north side, it is a possibility to be able to basically extend Conejos to where you see it right now and swing it a little bit to match the existing road of Stadium District. There is that opportunity, but we just wanted to show this one with sort of that open option. But again, on this one, because of the grades and everything else, we would have to do 2 bridges. If you see actually for the local roadway connection up at Conejos, and then down by the CDOT building and the stormwater situation as well. However, on this one, both BRT systems would be able to meet at one particular location as well. Next slide. And I think you guys have reviewed the majority of these, but I'm just trying to go over them really quickly again. Now, this one is the neighborhood connection. On this one, we take down the bridge. We try to level everything as much as possible, in Colfax and Federal meet at a traditional at-grade intersection. Think about, for example, Federal and Alameda. That level sort of at-grade intersection. Obviously, the benefits is that on this one, we can establish that grid network, we can establish that flexible park space, stormwater park space. The BRTs could meet. We have easy access to Decatur Federal Station, but one of the biggest hindrances with this one is that intersection of Federal and Colfax. Right now, both roads are owned by CDOT, and we have to go by CDOT standards of roadway cross sections. So basically, that means that this is going to be a pretty massive intersection. Again, think about Alameda and Federal. So it is really difficult, and I'm still trying to find examples of how another city has been able to develop, bring some level of density buildings that activate the store, like the first floor buildings. It's really nice to walk on when you have these massive roads right next to you. So that is definitely a mountain to be climbed. It's not like it's impossible, but it is an issue that we have to be very sort of aware of. So next slide. So basically, this is, September is my month to be going out to the communities. Yesterday, I presented at Sun Valley at the West Colfax RNOs. Today, I am here. Next week, I'm in Villa Park, and I'll be briefing our council members, in the next couple of weeks. And so basically, the intent of this is so that we can gather as much feedback as possible from folks. Again, it's not, we are heavily relying on what the previous efforts and what the current MPI effort has been doing with the community. We don't, in order to ask what are those values. And again, we don't want to get stuck on that road needs to go right here type of thing, but we just want to, basically state, our goals as a city. For that final report. And then the intent is for CDOT to start their phase in sometime in quarter 2, 2022, hopefully a little bit earlier. So with that said, and I saw somebody in the chat has already sort of jumped on, next slide, please, has already jumped on the story map. It's basically, we have a story map that basically goes a little bit more into detail into what we have been doing for this last year and a half. And we're asking just really open-ended questions about what you like and what you don't like about the scenarios that I just went through. Please feel free to go at it. I don't believe that there's a character limit. And I know that this has not been a very perfect process, to say the very least. But right now we're trying to make the best of it and trying to figure out how we can figure out how to best move forward and at least put down on paper in order for CDOT to really take a look at how to transform the site and figure out that there is that strong not only community push to transform this baby, but also from Denver side of things, that we are open to a whole lot of things as long as they meet our values, and we're potentially even open to obviously allocating funds, infrastructure funds, to try to change this thing. But obviously, it's CDOT-owned property, and hopefully this pushes them over the limit for that. I think this is the next slide. Next slide, please. I don't know if there's another one. I can't remember. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So this is my general schedule. Again, I'm trying to wrap this baby up in October, September, my meeting month, and then the next one. And I think that's it, or no? Yeah, okay, so here are my web pages. So please, so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
We have about 5 to 10 minutes, so thank you very much for this refresher on this project, Gabby. I know you've been working really, really hard on this, but let's take about 5 or so minutes and just see if there are questions from the steering committee that you would like to raise or just talk with Gabby about. And remember, I can't see you, so you'll have to chime in.
I see Heidi has her hand up. I don't know if you don't mind. I think I've got. Well, I'll tell you. So Heidi and Evan have their hand up. I don't know who had their hand up.
Let's start with Heidi, and then we'll go to Yvonne.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, so great. So I heard you say a couple things. I'm just asking for a little clarification. So in the beginning, it sounded like we wanted this plan to also, and I think that the group here would probably want it to be coordinated with things that are going on with the West Colfax bond project, and then how things flow from the west side through this area and through Sunnyside and then through the stadium district. What's that?
Sun Valley, you mean? Not Sunnyside?
Oh, sorry, did I say Sunnyside? Sun Valley and thank you, and the Broncos, the stadium project.
Absolutely.
So how, but then later it sounds like we want to just stick to concepts to hand over to CDOT. So I'm just wondering how, like, and I know the stadium district, I think they're just in the middle of their IMP, and I'm not sure if that even has moved forward in a while. So how do we simultaneously coordinate those things to make sure that there is movement through these projects and hand it over, I guess? And do you mean at the end of October it gets handed over to CDOT, or?
Yes, I mean, the way that the report is going to read is, well, that in my head is going to read right now, obviously we're still laying out the outline for it, is basically, again, sort of laying down, those values, mobility, stormwater, public realm, and land use, and land use in general, and then under equity and so forth. So those are, in order, those, whatever ends up happening, whenever this gets redeveloped, they need to, whatever they propose needs to meet the majority of those goals. At least they need to at least attempt to try to meet those goals. Mobility and stormwater probably, well, I think all of them are pretty darn crucial. So it is a report that we are handing over, and we're being partners with CDOT for the next phase. It's not like we are stepping away from, after this, we're calling it quits, and we're not part of CDOT's phase. We will continue to be part of CDOT's phase, but they're going to be the ones leading. They're taking, the driver's seat on this one, when they have been sort of the passenger seat on ours through that process. So at this point, we don't know exactly what CDOT's plans are with their next phase. So that's why I'm not, we're not sure exactly where can we take it, because they can either go to a market analysis, or they can try to go for more traffic analysis, more that heavy data driven, that traffic analysis about how each one of these could work.
Just to add a little bit to that, this project, as I understand it, has been in two parts. So Denver got to go first, and as Gabby has clearly stated, for us, the city, us, and the community, us, to establish what's important, what our values are as it relates to this place, and then some of those concepts and sort of options and vision elements, if you will, through those concept designs that we saw. And they're just conceptual to really try to talk about ways that the cloverleaf could be approached. And now next, we hand over that body of work to CDOT for them to evaluate it through their lens, just like we did through our community, our values, our ethics, equity, all of those things. They're going to do a similar exercise. And I presume once they've gone through their exercise, the city and CDOT will come back together and look for those places that we have common interests to try to advance the work.
Right.
And now the good news, I think, in addition to Gabby and Dottie capturing information officially through their process and their project, we get to also do that with West. And that's why Gabby and I and Beth, who's been a part of both teams through OV, I think that's the benefit to the West area residents, is that we get to capture the essence of those values, those goals and objectives in the West area plan, so that it's not just one document, but several documents from the city's perspective that speaks to what's important to this place.
I would probably say that the NPI document has a lot more teeth than what this could have. because in any large development plan, we always go back to, well, what does the area plan say? You have to meet those goals. And so I do think that it's a benefit that both of these things were happening sort of at the same time, because we have a little bit of teeth through this effort, but at the end of the day, it's just a study. It's not adopted, by an entire department. Well, it is adopted by Dottie, but I think NPI has a lot more teeth than what we would have as a just a general concept study, as a visioning study. So I think, Evan, did you still have a question, or did we answer it or no?
Yeah, you answered most of it, but I just wonder, big corporations that are multi-million-dollar corporations, do they have a stake in this? Like the Bronco Stadium, what are they doing to help build this plan, and what are they going to contribute? Have you guys done that yet?
So the Stadium District has been part of the stakeholder group, so they help develop that, but we don't. They have only been a stakeholder at this. This is more focused on what Denver's values are, rather than, where do we want to see this go, rather than having, them saying, sort of a little bit having a stronger voice than Sun Valley, for example, or what is it, or West Colfax. I think that, in my eyes, they should have the same level of voice, because while they are a crucial partner in this, they're, as a corporation and as a large developer, they have a little bit different view, the ways of viewing things than the community that live there have.
Okay. Yeah, that's sad, because they can really help this project along. But anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are meeting with them one-on-one, by the way. So Avon, we are meeting with them one-on-one to get their perspective about sort of where sort of these 4 illustrations sort of come from. And again, they have been part of those stakeholder meetings, and they have been supportive so far of this. But again, we're, if they say, oh, we don't like this one, we're not going to remove it just because they don't like it. I mean, it's just, in our heads it's in my mind is they're another stakeholder with the same voting value as our other community partners.
And I think that once the project gets to a place where it is ready for some feasibility on how might the site get redeveloped and what it will take, right, which is probably still a little ways out, I do think that's we'll be able to engage the private side on what it could take for implementation.
And it's not like their opinions, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm belittling like their opinions. I just want to make sure that it's not just one particular side. But for example, we have heard that we want, if Stadium District gets redeveloped, our West communities want to be able to access all of the potentially new restaurants and amenities and so forth without having to go through Colfax and Federal. So having those local street connections match what the Stadium District is proposing is one of those crucial values that are shared by both, by pretty much all organizations that are part of the stakeholder team. So, and hopefully, once we get to that, maybe they will try to help out with some infrastructure dollars. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see.
I hope so. Thank you. I sure hope so, because they can really do a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they do have the capital to help out. So, and hopefully they're open to potential. Yeah, they're open to read new development also right next to them. So instead of a highway. So, Sean.
Yeah.
I was wondering, a lot of these plans, they seem to be really bike friendly, ped friendly, especially compared to where the Cloverleaf is now, which is a mess. And my simple impression is, if you make it more bike and ped friendly, you're going to make it less car friendly. And I think you kind of mentioned that in a way with saying that there's a potential, or you want to stay away from people getting off Federal and Colfax and going on the side streets. And there is the idea of like induced demand, where if you put another lane in, more people will drive and it'll fill up really quick. And I guess in a way, if you slow things down and make it less friendly for cars, I wasn't sure what kind of ideas you have about that. Would cars go into the side streets, a few streets off of Federal, or is that a possibility, or is that kind of different by the plans?
So, I mean, so that's why, we have that goal of mobility. And under mobility, one of the realms is actually connectivity, and it's multimodal connectivity. So, we do want to establish that local street network, that, that grid network, internal grid network, and we want to establish, that trail network as well, that is part of that flexible park space component. So, so that it's more comfortable, so that we have more options about either putting bicycle facilities or neighborhood bikeways inside that local street network or having those trails itself. But Federal Boulevard, it does play a role in our transportation system. So again, we don't want those heavy vehicles to go on our local roadway networks, right? So we do have to keep Federal. We have to understand that it is part of that crucial component as an arterial, and that's why we have different, different levels of our streets. Because again, I don't want a semi truck to be, going on one of the local roads. And there is an issue, obviously, and this is what the next level analysis that potentially CDOT has to conduct, because what happens if there is a major crash or something on Federal Boulevard? Where is that, where are those cars going to go? But that's also part of why having a street network, a grid network, is kind of crucial as well. So, we do have that as a goal. And these are just, these are options of how we can achieve those goals. And by establishing, obviously making it a priority for the BRT system to meet in one location, by having those local roadway networks, or by having that comfortable bicycle network, then hopefully those folks that live right there and work in downtown or work somewhere in West Colfax, they choose not to drive. Is by, we need to provide options for whatever's happening here, instead of just major, arterials or collectors.
I think we might have time for one more question or comment from our steering committee. Anyone?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for putting the link to the story map.
You're welcome. It's great. And it was helpful. I could see a lot more easily. And I was looking back at the matrix, and I appreciate how the matrix makes clear that green infrastructure and water management is a bottom line issue. I still haven't looked closely enough at the scenarios, but it appears at like a very cursory glance that that's clear in 2 of them, but not at all clear in others. But I didn't really give it a careful look. And so if those are bottom line things, then I don't think no option should have an option that doesn't use water as a resource, and use the gift and put it where it needs to be. So that might be, and I don't know.
And we're going to be pretty detailed on sort of the strength and weaknesses of each one. And I think this is where that that push and pull came with some of our other core partners onto what are in our heads, everything is equal. The mobility, placemaking, all of those values were equal. And for some of our other,
just love to interrogate that a little bit. Like they're not parts, like capturing the way that those interrelate. Those aren't equal. Like those are all essential things that a design should be able to do, and like mobility and water, managing those together is key. So I don't know. We don't have time to go into it that much, but the idea of equal variables, when there's some baseline things that just need to be in there, those things go well together, especially when
Okay, it will be interesting to hear more, just because maybe we're saying the same thing, but we're just not saying it we're not,
Might be.
yeah, because in my head, I'm like, yeah, of course you can achieve both, but some core partners are, they differentiate about that. They're like, oh no, stormwater should be at the bottom. And I'm like,
Well,
no,
yeah, but I don't know. There's some people who aren't really thinking about long-term well-being either. Our entire economy is based on extraction. So and we're heading towards a climate disaster. I mean, we are in it. What am I say heading towards it? There are wildfires everywhere and it's a total disaster. But joyful apocalyptic times, and we have to use the gifts that we have. And I appreciated the matrix by lifting up the things that need to be considered. Yeah. But I do think I read them as those are all bottom line things, and that a good design meets all of those minimal levels and finds creative ways to be able to have multiplier effects across all of them. And
if you don't mind putting that'll be fabulous, please. I love that language.
All right.
Yeah, email that to Gabby.
I'll send it to you. And I
appreciate and it's recorded too. So.
Oh, true. Then I don't have to. Good.
All right. In the interest of time, I want to just encourage you all to reach out, use these links. You can, of course, communicate to Gabby through me if you don't already have a way of reaching her. But continue to put your thoughts and comments in the chat stream so that we can make sure that share that information with Gabby and her team. Yes. And thank you all so much for listening to this again, for those who heard it the first time, and for continuing to help the city shape and mold the values that we want to make sure get in the hands of CDOT. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to move along because this one's pretty important. I don't know if it will require a great deal of conversation, but I did want to just very quickly do a quick check on the schedule. You all have seen this graphic. We still continue to sort of live at the end of this graphic where we're working very diligently to get things produced and pulled together for your review. But taking another look at how this lays out, and the additional time that we were able to secure to get us through the holiday season, this is the new sort of snapshot at our schedule. So really we are, and I say we, but it's really the other members of the West team. I really have to give credit where it's due. We've got a great deal of support from our consultant team. We've got amazing support from our agency partners. I saw Anna Claudia on the call earlier. We heard from Zach just a little while ago. We could not do this work without them, and others as well, John and David. And also a special shout out to the West team, and that would be Valerie, Becca, and Sung for working their tails off to really pull this draft together. So our goal is to get it completed, the full first version, in the September-October timeframe. As with any product that we produce, it needs to go through the internal review process, and we really see that happening in the November timeframe. And you all are included in that timeframe because you are a part of the development team. Because again, we can't do this without you. And then assuming that we are all in connection and sort of agreement with the key components, our hope is to then get a public review draft ready over the holiday timeframe so that we can start the first of the year going through a public review. And again, outreach and engagement is really going to continue throughout. We don't have any intentions of stopping that process. So we want to continue having conversations with you, your friends and neighbors, coming to your organizations, and really do that through the holiday timeframe and really be ready to kick it off at the beginning of the year. And assuming that things are really tight with this first draft, really making any modifications and refinements in the months of January and February based off of the public input and feedback that we receive, taking that input and refining for what we hope will be a second and potentially final draft, and have that really ready at the end of February, 1st of March, so that we can begin the adoption process. And for us, for those who haven't been through this before, there are a number of different city agencies and committees that we would want to review this document with. Many committees that include members of City Council, as well as our planning board. Because really the planning board has responsibility on land use decisions and guidance and direction. And then assuming a successful review through that process, really looking to get through the adoption, the official adoption with City Council, really towards the end of April. So this is another way of looking at that graphic and the steps that we've got outlined for us. Now, one of the things I wanted to at least put out there for you all to think about, we don't necessarily have to reach any conclusions tonight, but when we started this process, we asked for an 18 to 24 month commitment. And you saw the number, we were at 23 tonight. So October will mark the 24-month time frame working with you all. We're having some internal discussions on whether or not we would want to really sort of slow our meeting schedule with you all and really only bring you back at some key milestones. So that is an opportunity. For example, we would probably want to try to meet with you in addition to October, perhaps November. We could potentially take December off, give everyone a break, just so everyone a chance to relax and enjoy the holiday season. Then come back and meet with you in January or potentially February. So one of those two, maybe not necessarily both. And then again, meet with you either in the March or April timeframe. So beginning to relax the cadence of our meetings is an option. The other option is if you all are wanting to continue with a monthly meeting and to stay engaged, we probably might still take December off. But we could continue the monthly cadence just so that you remain connected, really truly understand the content, and that we are able to respond to you and what you're hearing, because really when we get into this review process, we're really going to be asking you all for your assistance. We have talked about providing like take-home kits, meeting in a box, other types of resources so that you all can hold your own meetings as you see fit. I know you've been doing that really already this year, meeting one-on-one with your friends and neighbors. And so we would want to encourage you to continue doing that to whatever level is right for you. And of course, we are happy to be there. We don't need to be if you guys want to have a private sort of community-focused conversation. But we do want to make sure that we're providing you with the materials that will provide you with what you need in order to have those conversations. So definitely think that over, and maybe we can talk about that between now and our October meeting. And then really looking at what's coming up. October, right now, we've been in discussions with Annalise Hoke, who presented, I think even almost a year ago now, on the affordable housing incentive package that the city is working on. For those of you connected to affordable housing, you know that a lot of changes occurred this year at the state level, which is given local jurisdictions like Denver the ability to explore other tools that previously we did not have available to us to try to incentivize affordable housing outcomes. And so Annalise has been working really through all of the changes that happened at the state level and is putting together a nice package, if you will, of incentives and approaches to affordable housing development that we think is appropriate for Denver. And so I've asked her to earmark October 21st to come back and give this group an update so that, again, as we provide you with the draft plan, you guys can have that information in the background to see how it applies to West. And then, oh, I think I just noticed something. Sorry, I hate it when I notice my mistakes live. So November is not going to be a repeat of October, but November, I think really we would like to be prepared to walk through some of the content in more detail of the plan, particularly to point out how we have responded to your calls for really holding up and highlighting equity and some of the social, environmental opportunities that we have in the West for corrections, if you will, from past decisions. Really want to kind of walk you through where you can find information within the draft plan so that if you don't want to read the whole thing, but you really want to focus in on topics that are important to you or to your community, we can share with you where those that content lives. So more to come on that as we continue to refine the draft that we're working on. And we could look to do that in November so that you would be set up to review the draft through the holiday timeframe. I believe that is it on tonight's presentation. Again, while the survey that has been open really throughout the summer is not accessible through our website, the survey does remain open. I will send out a copy of this presentation at the conclusion of tonight's meeting, where this link is an active live link, and just really continue to encourage you all to share this with your communities, to encourage them to continue to take this survey if they would like to, recognizing that the draft review may not happen now until the 1st of 2022. We really are continuing to encourage communities of color to participate in the survey. We've got really strong representation from the West Colfax neighborhood and the Villa Park neighborhood, but we really want to make sure that the voices in our other 4 neighborhoods are having an opportunity to be heard through this process. So whether it's Sun Valley or Val Verde or Barnum neighborhoods, we really want to continue to encourage folks to participate. And that is either by, online tools like the survey, or by inviting us to come and have meetings with you all. It could be a one-on-one or a meeting and I say meeting, and I mean to say most likely virtually given the conditions of COVID. But if there are outdoor opportunities where our health is at a lesser risk, we certainly can entertain those types of events as well. But we're just being mindful, particularly now as the weather gets cooler and we're going to have to spend more time indoors. We just want to be mindful that we're following the city's public health guidance on that. So I will pause there just to see if there are any questions in closing for tonight before we thank you for your time. Any questions? All right, hearing none, I would just like to thank you all for your continued diligence with sticking with us, your support and your voices. So thank you very much, and enjoy your night and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.